Thank you. Well, welcome to our My School Info Deep Dive. My name is Ray Girdler. I am the Director of Data Use and Privacy. Fortunately, I get to work on the My School Info project with Arjit, Dr. Saunders, Daniel, and some others. And today I'm excited to show everyone some things that are new and how to use My School Info to get deep into some of the data that you're trying to look at. So just on the front end, just know that this session today is for people who have already been exposed to My School Info. You've already been on My School Info, so it's really for those. It's not an introductory. This is for those who have already been in My School Info and want to know more and how to get it to work for them. So I'm going to jump back to the back so I can drive from my laptop. I have Daniel working the chat on the Zoom session. So if you're on the Zoom session and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them to Daniel. Daniel, will you ask them to make sure they can hear? Excellent. All right. So if you haven't been to My School Info, just to make sure we're all in the same spot, I'm going to go kind of slow so that those of you who would like to navigate along with me, you're welcome to do so. So it's at myschoolinfo.arkansas.gov. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to do an advanced search, or better yet, an advanced search. So here's what happens. A lot of people, when they come in here, and this is in our intro sessions, is we show people how to do an advanced search by using the advanced filters. And we say, hey, if you want to check out schools that have a graduation rate of greater than 80%, well, let's do 95. You can use those advanced filters and you could find those schools pretty quickly. So here's one of the questions we get a lot. One of the questions we get is, what if I want to do an advanced search for students that aren't in the filters that are available here? Like, what if I wanted to see what schools had African American population of 75% or higher? What if I wanted to just view the charter schools? What if I had other searches I wanted to search on that aren't included in these advanced filters? How do I do that? Well, here's how you would do it. You actually wouldn't use advanced filters at all. We'll call it an advanced search. If you want to do an advanced search, go down here and run a statewide report. So the first one I'm going to give you an example of is how to run all the charter schools in our state. And I think if we do a couple of examples, you'll realize, oh, I could do this with anything. And you really can. So I'm going to go school statewide reports. And it pulls up to a screen that should feel very familiar. And what we're going to do, we're going to leave it on the current year. And we are going to select general. And in general, you're going to see columns for open enrollment charter, conversion charter. And just to make sure I'm looking at the correct schools, I'm going to add some additional indicators. And let's add some data on there as well. So let's go down. And let's pull some demographic information like GT that we typically don't pull during our demonstrations. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select all. It's going to select all those categories for GT. And then I'm going to hit generate report. And we wait. It should work pretty quickly. Remember, the maximize window will give you a larger view so that you can look at your schools, more schools at one time. And what you're going to find is when you do this, It's all 1,065 schools. And you might say, well, that didn't help me at all. But if you come on over here, if you scroll over, you'll notice that the open enrollment charter has indicators over here for false or for true. And if you hit this little caret button, top hat, you can decide whether or not you want to filter for those who are true and those who are false. So for this one, I'm going to do is true. I'm going to hit filter. So now I went from 1,065 to 47. So all the schools I'm looking at now are my charter schools, my open enrollment charter schools. You can switch back and forth however you want. If you wanted your conversion charters, you would change this back to false. And you could change this one back to true. And now I have all my conversion charters. For this activity, I'm going to switch it back. Even though I'm just looking at my open enrollment charters, and you can sort. I'm going to go GT total. You can sort by hitting the double arrows at the top. And what's nice is even here, I'm going to restore the window. Even here, I'm limited to what kind of looks like an interactive spreadsheet. What's nice about this report, if you want to, there's a couple options that you have that sometimes we overlook. You can always log in, especially if you're one of those people who is doing an advanced search where you're manipulating files to get to later. A lot of these advanced searches can take you a little bit of time, and you're going to want to save them. And if you log in, you're going to have the ability to save a report. And you don't see that until after you log in.
So can the general public search this site as well?
So the general public has the ability to search the site. Everything on the site is public knowledge. However, to save a report, you have to be a statewide employee. You either have to work for the state or you have to work for a public school. For state employees, it uses your Active Directory, your AD Active Directory account, your credentials. If you're a school employee, it'll use their Active Directory, their eSchool login, or their eFinance login. Is sometimes referred to, but it's their Active Directory login. But as soon as you hit the name, you hit save, and it'll remember it. And you can always get to your saved files in your profile. And you can see my saved reports. And you'll be able to access them there. So I'm going to maximize view. When I hit back, I lost my filters. So I'm going to turn enrollment charter back on, true, filter. I'm back down to 47. Another really neat trick is once you get your schools filtered out, you see where it says 47, you can go directly to Analyzer from this page. So it'll take those 47 schools that are listed here on this page, and you can go to Analyzer and you can start analyzing scores. Here's an example. I like to use the map. I'm going to go to map and I'm going to go select. Notice that the ACT Aspire preliminary data is in here. Whenever after the post appeals process, these two tabs will be combined, but until that time they're separate. And you could tell real quick, if you're looking at it, you'll see the fields here, and you can tell they haven't been manipulated, and it's the file that comes directly from ACT Aspire. And you'll see where it says English, you don't see the subgroups. Whereas if you're up here in ACT Aspire 2016, you can see each of the subgroups. And after post appeals, we'll have that data, and we'll be able to publish those subgroups as well. But right now, we don't have it. And so I'm going to go grade 3 preliminary STEM. You could come down here. I'm going to zoom in. So this is a snapshot of the third grade STEM performance for all the charter schools in our state. Whereas the green's the top third, the yellow's the middle third, and the red's the lower third, which is a very interesting view when you're trying to figure out, and not only can you tell how they performed, you can also, this is a good snapshot of where our charter schools are generally located in our state, which is a good snapshot as well for third grade. So let's do something different. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit search. Search will take me home. What some of us feel like is a home key is that search key. So here's another advanced search. So same idea. If you're going to do an advanced search, I'm going to go to school statewide. And so one of the questions I always get is, okay, we have low SES, but low SES looks different in our state. Some people have low SES African American. Some people have low SES Caucasian. Some people have low SES EL. So if I wanted to look at something different, other than I don't want to lump them into low SES, if I really want to take a look at race and at what the effects of race are in our state, what does that look like? So you got to think, anything, if I know I want to filter on it, if I know I want African American 75%, that means I have to make sure one of my fields is African American population so I can set those filters. So I have to choose what I want to filter on, and then I have to add all the fields I want to look at. So in this case, I want to filter out for African American, but I want to look at all their scores from the previous assessments, or at least from 2015, 2016. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to 2015, 2016, and we need to do that for the same reason we just talked about. The current preliminary data doesn't have the race. So if I want to look at race right now, I'm going to have to look at 2015, 2016. So I switched my year to 2015, 2016. I'm actually going to clear my selection first. So I got 2015, 2016. I'm going to come down here to students. I'm going to select attendance rates for African American. I'm going to look at the enrollment of the school. That's something I like to keep on. Demographics, African American. Percentages, African American. And for this example, I'm going to look at grade 6 data. So I'm going to put the grade 6 enrollment on there. We look at gifted and talented African American. Graduates, graduation rates. All right. And then we're going to jump down. I like to collapse my bars as I navigate through. And I'm going to come down to the ACT Aspire performance. And what's really neat is this gray box up here. It'd be tempting to go down through here and select African American every time. And I'd have to do it for each grade. What's nice is up here, if I select it in the top, it'll go and it will check. See how it checked every one of them for African American? And then I'm ready to roll. I could come right on over here to generate report. And all my selections should carry over. As we wait. There it goes. I haven't pulled over my filter yet. So right now it's going to do everybody. You'll filter it once it makes it to the statewide report. Then you can come over to your demographics. And for like demographic percentage, I can change it to is greater than or equal to 75%. I filter that out. I can also, you'll see some schools have very different populations as well. You may not want to compare someone who has 38, even though they have 100%, to someone else that has 107. So sometimes that's one reason why I always leave the count. Like the count lets me know, because when you just have the percentage, you don't know how many students are in that percentage. So if you I always put the count with my percentage so that I know how many students are making up the percentage I'm looking at over there. And if I choose to add it, I can go as greater than or equal to. I'm going to put 100. So now I have only schools that have more than 100 students and only schools that have a student population of 75% or higher. And it looks like there's 75 schools in our state. And down at the bottom, in case you forgot, you have the max, minimum, and average that's being calculated for those schools. And you could do the same thing. You could look at analyze LEAs. It'll take all those 75 schools.
So what kind of graph does it produce?
Well, it produces a scatter plot, and then you could create a trend line. So let's choose something that we know there is a correlation. Like, so I have 2016, 2017 selected. I'm going to hit select. It's going to pull up the same view that we saw previously. And when you're thinking about what can you compare, the analyzer will allow you to compare any two variables that you want. And what will really challenge you is thinking about, this is the first time with MySchoolInfo where you can actually compare student data with HR and financial data. Before that, they existed in separate systems. And if you wanted any kind of customers reports, you had to do them externally, export them, and do your own manipulation outside the system. But now, if you want to compare something as simple as like staffing trends, you can look at your personnel. You can look at your, let's do personnel second. Our independent variable students, I'm going to look at their third quarter ADM. And then you can look at your staff. And we do use this example a lot when it talks about staffing trends, because there's a really strong correlation between the students enrolled. But we have that state law that requires the number of students per teachers. And so the linear relationship is there, and it's obvious whenever you graph it. But what's really nice is not that there's a relationship, but to know whether or not, and this is where the analyzer really plays key, is whether or not you're above or below. Because here I can get a glimpse of, am I overstaffed or am I understaffed? And this is just for staffing, but you can always determine what's the trend in the state, and then determine whether or not you're above the trend or below the trend. And that's what's really powerful about the analyzer. And sometimes it's hard to figure out, well, should I be below or should I be above? Because sometimes it's good to be on top. And I'll show you an example in a second. And sometimes it's good to be on bottom. But here I got, you sure can. You sure can. And so here I have Robert. They have an ADM of 322, and their teachers are 35. And I go right below, that's really close, that's 320, and they have a total of 22 teachers. So they have really close populations, but one's above the line and one's below the line. And you can see those who are well below and those who might be well above. You can also come right down here, and they're all listed in the table. And you can actually type in a school. Like, see, this one's way below. You got Stewart. So I can actually type in Stewart, and it'll pop up. And I see his point is 437.24, 537.24. I can come over here to about 537. 537.24, and you can find the dots that you want. What you'll find on all of your graphs, you have the ability to share, and this is really powerful. Sometimes it's overlooked.
I like it that you can export it to Excel.
You can export it to Excel, and it comes off very clean. The PDF also comes off very clean as well. You can't sort it.
Or with the export to Excel, I can then put it in my Inspire and do all kinds of.
You sure can. You sure can. Another neat piece with the share, and we talk about this from time to time, but sometimes when you're being introduced to My School Info the first time, you're not paying attention to the additional things that you can do. So if I'm looking to share with a group of folks, or if I'm looking to share with my PLC, you can enter, so here I have staffing trends. I'll put my name, my email address, nothing like Google remembering your personal information on a statewide webinar
It's also being live streamed.
and live streamed. Now, you can enter as many email addresses as you want here. So here I'm going to enter my colleague, Daniel Collier. Feel free to email him anytime.
Put it in the message box.
In addition, you can separate emails by putting a comma. So I'm just going to list a couple. So I'm also going to put my boss's name. You can let him know how great this webinar is, or how awful. Hopefully you don't feel that way. Oh yeah? Okay. And you can send it to every member of your PLC, every member of your public school board, every member in your leadership team, and share that information. You just verify you're not a robot.
Is it password protected? Will they have to enter their credentials to get the reports?
They sure do. No, they do not, because everything's public.
My question, sorry. My question was whether, if you share a report, would it be password protected? Would they need their credentials to view the report?
No, they don't need a password. Here's what we always encourage people to do. If you want to know how it's going to send, before you send it to yourself. Share it with yourself. And what it'll do is it will share the parameters, and it'll say click this link. You'll click on the link. It'll say you filtered on this, and you run it, and it runs it based on whatever your permissions are. Since most of the information is public knowledge, you can share whatever is in there anyways. The only people who have rights that are protected are superintendents. So superintendents can see the reserve values if they want to see them. But even if they were to share it, whoever they share it with is still going to run those reports based on their credentials. So they wouldn't see the reserve values unless they were superintendent or one of the superintendent's appointees. So another quick tip is a lot of times you get to the analyzer, you run the report, but once you're already here, you can switch and look at multiple things very quickly. So here I just clicked on it and I looked at teachers. I can click on it again, and in just seconds, I can go from certified staff to classified staff and do a similar analysis. Am I overstaffed or am I understaffed with my classified employees? I'm going to hit Analyzer, and we're going to look at some other trends. So when I hit Analyzer, it kind of resets it. So now I have all 262 districts. Those 72 schools I had, it forgot it. All right, so we've moved on. And we're just going to use Analyzer to just think about how we look at data and inferences that we can make from data. And I'll give you some examples. I'm going to use some that still have trends and are trending right now, and that would be the preliminary data. It's very hot right now, is the preliminary data. How did students perform? What inferences can we make of the preliminary data, and how can we move forward? So let's look at ACT Aspire Preliminary. And let's choose some categories in which we think there are trends. So I'm going to jump down to 6th grade. So I'm not in the same spot all the time. And let's look at that ELA composite. And here's what you hear a lot, being in the classroom, they'll say, good readers, having good literacy skills helps you everywhere. All right, let's see if that's true. So one of those is being a good reader helps you in math. So instead of taking people's word for it, you can say, well, maybe that is true, maybe it's not. I can look at preliminary, grade 6. I can look at math, percent of students meeting the benchmark, readiness benchmark. Turn on the correlation, That's a strong correlation at 77%. You can switch it over. So I know that I can see there's a positive trend with English language arts scores and math scores, but what about science? And just a click, you can throw science up there as well. So we could do science, percent of students meeting benchmark. Look at that. It jumps up. It's at 86. And what's really interesting to me is we often associate like math and science, you know. Watch what happens when you compare, instead of ELA and science, you do math and science. It's actually a little bit less. I think if you want to go back full circle, it's back to where we started. And when you look at your English language arts, and this time instead of math or science, let's do math and science. You see even stronger correlation. So maybe it's not just shocking. It's at 91. Maybe it's just not shocking. Maybe it just reinforces some of those things that you already knew. But I think it brings a lot of strength and tells you a little bit, not just about some preconceptions you might have had about students through performance, but it also gives you a little insight of how the English language arts scores affect or impact the math and science scores on the ACT Aspire exam. Now, let's look at something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to search. And you've seen a couple of tools already, right? You have seen the how to do an advanced search for charter schools, an advanced search for African American. Just keep in mind, you can do an advanced search for anything. You can also do an advanced search or create tables for charts or values that may not be numeric. And that's one of those fields like, what's out there that's not numeric that I might find really valuable? Well, let's do an example for West Memphis. So I'm going to go districts. I'm going to go West Memphis. Now here's another way to get schools on your list, like an advanced search. That's different than using the advanced filters. So I'm going to go West Memphis School District. And I'm using West Memphis because we're going to look at programs and the academic programs. And they've done a really good job at listing all the programs for all their elementary schools. Yeah, go ahead.
Will that analyzer show change over time?
I can show you change over time, but the analyzer itself just does a 1-year comparison. One thing, we'll take a look, like when I get ready to do change over time, and that's kind of looking at trends in a different way. I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. But for one really neat thing about Analyzer that'll be coming out here pretty soon, if you all remember back when the State Department was contracted with ARC, they had some graphs in there called the Hive, and they had the growth versus performance graph. Well, what you have right here for Analyzer, I'm going to pull that back up. Here, within the next, very soon, it's probably the safest way to say that, we will have growth data in My School Info, and you'll be able to look at something like STEM performance, and I'm just going to post STEM and ELA so you can get an idea of what it'll look like, so you can visualize it. But here pretty soon, we'll be able to do STEM or math performance, and you'll have math growth performance. And it's essentially the same graph, where you'll know if I'm high growth or high performance and high growth, I'll still be up here in this quadrant. And you'll be able to see that. And that's one of those charts that was very popular at one time, and you'll have some of the availability back in My School Info. But if I forget to answer your question, remind me. I'll show you how to do it over time. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to search. I'm going to look for all the schools in West Memphis School District. So in order to do that, notice I'm searching for schools by district. I'm going to type in West Memphis. Once I have West Memphis selected, I'm going to hit search. West Memphis has 11 schools. I want to just look at grade 6. And this is another way you can use your filters over here on the far left. I'm going to select every grade but grade 6. Because for me, I'm evaluating schools that serve grade 6, and watch what happens. Now here's the thing when you start playing with the filters. If I just select grade 6, there's not a school, or there's not many schools in our state that just serve grade 6 alone. So when you hit apply, knowing how they're going to behave is important, because here it doesn't just show schools that serve just grade 6, it's schools, any schools in the district that serve grade 6. They may serve additional grades, but grade 6 checked out. They're all there. So here I have 7 schools. Instead of selecting for compare, I'm going to come down here to the plus sign. And I can do this with anything as well. Anytime I have a search and I do a search and it pulls up, I can generate that report. And then under general, I'm going to go ahead and list district. But I can select all the programs. Since I'm focusing on grade 6, I'm also going to come in here. Oh. Choose grade 6. I could generate the report. And this is one of those reports that, especially over here, that would be easier to view if I did export it. So here I'm going to export to Excel. And just to kind of some tricks, if you want to fix a column, my selection,
Is it under view, maybe?
it sometimes is under view. It's okay.
It's called freezing sheet.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah, and whenever sometimes when you switch over from your laptop, which is to the widescreen, and then you go to you lose some of your options. Here, I believe on the Mac, it'll say review and it'll say split, and it'll allow you to split your screen. Either way, if you scroll over, you'll be able to see, and it'll list out all the programs that are listed at that elementary school. And you can sit here and you can compare. Like if my kid's interested in robotics, this is important to me that I couldn't have found anywhere else. If my kid wants robotics, and I'm located in the West Memphis School District, I can look and I can compare each one of these. I can see what kind of out-of-school programs they offer, which enrichment programs they offer, and I could see robotics is listed at Richland Elementary. If that's important to me, and like other analysis, and you might be able to do a pivot table off that or something like that if you wanted to get a little more and split it out by the comma. So I'm going to come back, and I'm going to do that search again. Now you can use the search. I'm not going to play with the search a whole lot, but you can use the search for anything. And like one other good way is schools. People are always looking for schools in your area, and there's different ways that you can get it. A lot of people do a co-op, but if you search by co-op, like Arch Ford, you're not going to get all the charter schools in your area because it's going to leave those out. So if you want to get a region, some people like to compare multiple regions. It doesn't matter. You can search for any school by zip code. Like, I'm going to search for a school near me. And I hit search. It found 137 schools within 25 miles of that zip code. And you can play with that zip code and reduce it or grow it. It doesn't matter how big or how small you make it. You can always come down here and generate that report, and it will let you manipulate that spreadsheet like we've been doing all morning or all afternoon. So here's another scenario. And I'll show you how to do this one over time. So sometimes across our state, it doesn't happen very often, but there's a handful of districts schools that happen every year. And those are schools that reconfigure and get new LEAs. And when they get new LEAs, how do I find their data in MySchoolInfo? And then how do I access my old information over time? And how do I compare my old information to my new information? What would that look like? So here's an example for us. One school that I know that got a new LEA was Cloverdale Middle. So we're going to go to schools. We're going to search for Cloverdale. You notice that it pops up. You can view Cloverdale like you would. You can see that it's filled out for all of its systems. You can look at its stats and you can look at their performance. The preliminary data hasn't made it over to these charts yet, but it will soon after post appeals. But watch what happens when you switch between 15, 16. And you might think, well, I know my kid went to Cloverdale last year. I know they had students. They should have some stats to share. Where did it go? And they used to be called Cloverdale Aerospace Middle School. And so, how do you get that information? There's a couple of ways you can get to it. The easiest way I know to get to it is something like this. When you do a search, instead of doing a search by school, do a search by district. Because most of the time, when people apply for new LEAs, the districts don't get a new LEA. It's just the schools within the district that get a new LEA. So Cloverdale is part of the Little Rock School District. And I can hit search. And I can view Little Rock. Okay, what's nice about when you're here at this tab, and I always tell people, if you're looking at schools, you're trying to view all the schools in the district, sometimes it's easier to go by district because all the schools are listed here instead of searching for each school individually. If you know that you want to look at schools in Little Rock, go to the district tab, go to the schools tab, and you can click on any of these, look at their data, and then switch back, and then look at another one and switch back. So we were talking about Cloverdale. You see where it says Cloverdale Middle, that's where we just were. If you were to click on it, you would see that. But you can switch between the year. So here I have 16-17. If I switch to 15-16, it will list all the schools that were active in Little Rock for the 15-16 year. There we go. And now you see Cloverdale Aerospace, and it has a different LEA. It's 6001702. And then I can click on the aerospace. They serve the same grades. Now I can look at their stats and their performance. And you can switch between the years. I can look at their 14-15. I can look at their 13-14. But as you might expect, if you were to jump up to 16-17, it's not going to be there. And in this case, it's not there for several reasons, or a couple, but it's not here as well. So what do I do if I want to compare the old LEA with the new LEA? If sometimes that's dangerous, because a lot of times you get an LEA because of a reconfiguration, and so maybe it's not good to compare. But if you wanted to, if there was a reason you wanted to compare school over time, notice that even though this LEA is no longer active, I can still select it to compare. And I'll add it to my card up here in my compare. If I go back to search, now I can search for Cloverdale. And some people ask, well, why wouldn't you see both schools? Well, this search bar defaults to the schools that are currently active. And it's defaulting to a search. It's searching for schools who are active in the default year, which is 16-17. And so here I see Cloverdale Middle. I can pull it up very quickly. I can hit search. And I can select this one to compare to. And even though it's the same school, it's going to treat it like it's two separate schools. Okay? Then I'm going to hit compare. And as you expect, some of these will have metrics for one and not the other. And it'll change as you switch between years. But here's what's interesting. You can hit that custom report. And we talk about this a lot in our trainings. When you get to the point where you want more than what's on that graph, where do I go? Well, one place to start is in that custom report. And in this one, I have both schools selected. Little Rock, Cloverdale Middle, and this LEA, which was Cloverdale Aerospace. We can try that. I'll show what it looks like. And I'm not going to do test data yet. I'll do it here in a second. But you want to see it over time. The issue with the test data over time right now, you can't show it over time if they're discontinuous. Like you can't show benchmark over time because there's no data exactly. And so you'll see that here. Soon this won't be an issue for assessment, but there are some other categories that'd be interesting to explore. Some popular ones would be graduation rate would be a good one. Since this is a middle school, we'll do discipline and homeless is another interesting one to look at. And at the top, where it says trending, we can take that view and view it over years. And we can generate that report. Now here's what happens when you put the state on the graph. Now, if you do the state with a percentage, it does fine. Because 90%, when you compare 90% to 90%, these columns over here are always auto scale. But when you do it based on count, you see where it will crank it up real high. Yeah. But you can always, if that happens to you, you can always turn it off by selecting it. And you can turn it back on. And so here you can see Cloverdale's discipline. Even though it doesn't graph it as a continuous graph, you can see it and you can see where they are. Yeah. And it's still, yeah, it's a pretty quick view. You can also see things like you're looking at homeless, trying to see what trends are going on in your school. You know, has it changed over time? Are the needs in your students or the students you serve changing? Which is interesting. It's an interesting look on how you can serve your children in your area and how important that is, even if your LEA changed, how to access your old information. It's still there, and that's what people need to understand is the data doesn't disappear. The data is still there. It's just knowing how to get to it and how to get to it to compare. So I have one more example that I'd like to show you all. And that's in the analyzer. Now we looked at analyzer to compare student data, and we looked at staffing. You can look, what I really like about analyzer, and I talked a little bit about this when comparing ACT Aspire, and out of all the tools that are available here, I think this is the one that's sometimes overlooked or underutilized, because it could be very powerful in trying to establish what you think is supposed to be and what we can do to serve our kids. And here's an example of one that just to get you thinking. So here I got 16-17 data. I'm going to switch to 15-16 because I want to look at graduate data. And let's look at third quarter ADM. So I like to start somewhere where it makes a lot of sense for me. That's kind of how I start to explore. And so when I get in here, I think to myself, if I have more students, I should have more graduates. I mean, just by nature. If I have more students, I should have more graduates. But when you graph it like this,
So this is a statewide.
this would be statewide. It's all 259 districts. And here we can look at the number of students each district has, and you can switch. This is one that you can use between schools too. And this one's probably better to do for schools anyways. Graduates.
Yes.
Is it the way I scroll?
No, I can't see. I'm trying to read that.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty small.
Just look over here at Beaumont's screen.
Well, even in a graph like this, we're talking about trends. Here you can compare two schools that serve roughly the same third quarter ADM and see how many of them are graduating. So again, you could determine, is it good to be above the line or below the line and why. You can filter the schools and the grades served if you want to look at it that way. But here you can easily tell and compare, whether or not you feel that you're meeting your kids' needs, and if so, how much above or how much below. But you can also, when we talk about graduates, like if your graduation rate is or is not what you want it to be, data always is, well, that's great, now I know what it is, but how do I get it to increase, right? And so if I look at something like graduates, if you want your graduation rate to increase, to me it makes a lot of sense. If I want my graduation rate to increase, I want my withdrawals, or my certain withdrawal, to decrease, right? And let's see if there's a relationship there. Because now I could find out, I could ask that question, and if I wanted to know the answer to it, it would take me days, if not hours, and a little bit of expertise, not only in Excel, but a little bit in Cognos or in Advanced Search in eSchool. And now I don't have to know any of that. All I have to do is know where my school info is, click on some filters. I got total graduates. We can go down here to dropouts, withdrawals. And some of these reasons don't count against your graduation rate. But for now, I'm going to hit total. Yeah, it's low. But you might do something. It might be lower for those, but you can use some like other. Or pieces that may not count against you or count against you, like lack of interest. Regardless, no matter what you choose, when you start looking at your data, you're going to go through this scenario, and whether or not you're above or below, you're going to still ask yourself that same question, why? That's great. I know that I'm below the state average, but why? And that's how you use the two pieces together. Like, I can always go back to compare. And for this one, I'm going to remove Cloverdale Middle. And just know that you can always go back. I mean, choose any school. It's so quick. I mean, you can choose any school, any district. I'm going to go Batesville. I hit search. I hit compare. I want to look at dropout rates, right? Look, I just hit custom report. I'll look at students. I can jump down here to dropout rates real quick. If you know where you're going, you come back at the top, you turn on that trend. You generate that report. Now, I know I did that quick. I just wanted to show you how quick you could do it. And I can look at each one of those. Now, I not only know why they're dropping out, I can see the trends over time of why they're dropping out. For each one of those. You can do it for discipline. And it's funny because the job, the role I served in my previous district, this was a major role of what I did. And if you're exactly right, if they knew what they have now at their fingertips, I feel like I came to the department at just the right time.
Now I know well you guys are math.
And you can sit here and you can just pull it really quick. And some people ask, well, this is great, Ray, that you can get to this information so fast. But if I didn't have time to watch this webinar today, how would I have known that? That chart is over here in the FAQ. And Daniel, who's sitting right here, has created videos for different roles. If you look at something like principal, how to identify discipline trends in your school, I just did it with withdrawals, but the skill he shows you right here with discipline, it takes you about a minute in. You notice that it's only 2 minutes and 45 seconds. This is also on our YouTube playlist with communications, our MSI YouTube playlist with communications. And I'm just going to let I don't think 2 minutes is too long. I think if you take a second to realize what a high quality videos are out there, how direct they are in the skill they try to teach you. And honestly, in comparing and preparing for some of my trainings, I'll review some of the videos just to kind of remember, how quick it is. But you could pause it whenever you want to. Daniel may even be a little bit better than I am at presenting. I'm not ashamed to say that. There we go. And here he showed you how to do it for a single. So here you're looking at all the display fractions at one time. But you can run it, save it, share it, run it again, throw those trends on.
So this data is automatically populated through eSchool?
Sure. Well, the data comes from eSchool, yes, but more specifically, the data comes from the cycle reports, which is repooled. So they submit their cycle reports that will pull from eSchool.
So it's not real-time data?
It's not real-time data in that sense. It's real-time in accordance with the cycle reporting. But one of the things that was really important is that the data that is here is all public. And the cycle data has always been public. And so that's worth showing. The So I'm going to show you if I can. So if you go to the ADE data, arcsol.gov, see if I can. Okay. If you go down to Student Information Systems, I'm going to come back here. But you have Statewide Information Systems reports. Previously, you could get all this data in one of these reports, like classified personnel. And it came and it generated something that looks like this. And that has the C. And what it's taken is it's taken all the files that have always been available and made public and put it in a place where it can easily be shared, analyzed, and interpreted. But that's an important point to make. So if you're messing around with MySQL info quite a bit, one of the questions you're going to have at one time, is you're going to ask yourself, when does the data get in there? So if you're using it, you're going to want to know, when does that data get in there? Well, if you're in the SIS and you're in Student Information Handbooks, or it says SIS Handbook 2017-2018, you may have never downloaded this. And it's 158 pages. I don't expect you to read every page, but if you'll scroll down to about the 5th page, you're going to see a table which I find very valuable. No matter where you are in education, there's a simple table that one tells you there are 9 cycle reports. If you didn't know that, here they are. When are they due? Well, they're due September 30th, October 15th, November 15th. So if they're not on this sheet, that data will not be there before the date that's listed. You could tell which fields are listed every time, like calendar or contact person or district. And as you scroll through here, each cycle indicates which field is being reported every time the cycle report runs. It's 3 pages. And it's 3 simple pages from my point of view. If you want to know what each one of these includes, like student grades, if you want to know each individual field, that's what the rest of the document's for. But if you just need to know when are students' grades going to be out there, when are some of these codes going to be asked, like medical dyslexia, that's one of the fields that you can pull in MySQL info. When is that information going to be there? Well, in this case, it would be after June 15th. So that's a good piece of information. At this point, it is almost 2 o'clock, and I am going to try to take any questions if you have any. All right. Are there any? Yeah, you can ask a question.
All right, ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so when we're looking at correlation, so 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah.
When you see ACT composite data and try to correlate that with national board, and it shows no correlation, does that mean ACT didn't pull that data? Is that why you don't see a correlation?
Let's try to regenerate that
Okay.
report and see if we
So
can take
in
a
the
look
meantime, can I ask another question while you're
at it.
getting there?
Go ahead.
I still see highly qualified teacher in there. Are we moving to Arkansas highly qualified, or at some point do we know when that's changing? Or
We just need to update it if the terminology is not.
and that will soon then you'll begin to look at if ESSA goes through the way we're looking at it with the definition for an effective teacher or leader, then we'll be able to correlate those filters as well, right?
You should be able to, yeah.
Sweet.
Highly qualified should still be tagged to the old data though, so that as you look at change over
People on
time.
live stream can't hear the question.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, you're right. The people who were previously highly qualified, if I was looking at that data and that's how it was reported for the 15-16 year, I still
Right.
should be able to look at it for the 15-16 year. But as the new year comes, we're saying those filters still need to be there as those changes are made.
Old
yeah.
data.
Yeah, kind of like of like the old LEAs. And there may be, it's an interesting conversation to have, and I'll,
Because that term
Yeah.
will be replaced with something else in
Oh.
ESSA, so you would need to make
Agreed.
that correlation just like you would with
Agreed.
the new LEAs.
and our biggest goal, or one of our biggest goals, especially with My School Info, is to keep it up to date so that one day not only does it report all those fields that you're winning on, especially for those that are used for accountability and high stakes, but there's also been a lot of discussion as could it even replace the report card altogether? And if that was the case, or made the report card made available inside of My School Info, and so all that terminology and all those fields would be part of what My School Info is. So just backtracking, you try to compare ACT Composite, number of national board teachers. Well, the ACT for 16-17 isn't in yet. So the first thing I did, I'd switch to 15-16. Did you do that? Let's see. And I'm not pulling national board. The number of national boards pulling no data. What year was it? Let's try it again. Alright, so ACT personnel. Hmm. I just need to look.
On the x-axis, just to see if you can
We could
pull
try
a
it.
period from there first without looking for a correlation.
Okay, we'll try that. Yeah, I'm not looking at that. I'm not sure why it's not pulling in. But that's the reason why there's no correlation. We can't correlate with no data in the data set, but we'll take a look at that. Thank you. No, that's that's one of the things. Everybody will use it in different ways, and the fields we're looking at is different than. So everybody brings their own perspective for us to look at. You got.
Yeah, you're right. It's just because we don't have the ACT scores for 16-17, and we only have national board for 16-17. So that
You're saying.
compare that until we get the new ACT.
Thank you. That's a very good point. So what we could do is we could do this. We should be able to compare national board. That's a good point, Daniel. We should be able to compare 16-17 to something like, which would be pretty close, to like 10th grade STEM, and if you wanted to show.
It won't give you residuals either, will it?
No, it won't.
R-squared values.
No, but what you could always take the data set.
Still have a job.
You can still take the data set and export it and do your analysis that way. And even in this scenario, here you're comparing all of the national board to students in 10th grade, whereas that may not be the best way to look at it. Like you may get a higher correlation if you take out the filters and look at grade 10. And it's always kind of tricky when you try to compare percents to numbers. Like here, we got a count on one and a percent on top. So it may even be better to look at 10th grade. But see, that's students tested, and that doesn't give you, but yeah, like the number of students who met the benchmark instead of the percent of students who met the benchmark. You might get So it does not take away that piece of where you could compare any two things you want, but you have to be really careful about what you're comparing it and make sure you're interpreting it correctly. So thank you. Good save, Daniel. All right. Are there any other questions? It's always all right. Well, I appreciate your time. And if you do have questions or they come to you later, please reach out at any time. My email information's listed there, and thank you very much.